This is my 4.1 ethical and legal considerations in sports and exercise science research. So, the history. So, during the time of the Second World War, scientists were working on the Germans' behalf got sent to Nazi concentration camps. The scientists conducted and carried out tests on the prisoners and workers. The majority of the exercises carried out were extremely unethical. If the same exercises were carried out today, the scientists would find themselves in prison due to the law and ethics. However, in 1947 a code of conduct was enforced, and this was called the Nuremberg Code of Conduct. This code was enforced to protect the participants and make research ethical and legal. Scientists had to stick to these rules, otherwise there were consequences. The rules were then adopted in 1964 by the World Medical Association due to the code and the fact that the organisations update the rules every so often. Research is now carried out ethically and legally the majority of the time. So, ethics is moral principles that governs a person's behaviour or the conducting of an activity. So this is what's right or wrong and just morals. So, and legal is abiding by the law and making sure you don't break the law by doing acts that are against the law, working within the boundaries of the civil law. So, what is BASES? BASES is the British Association of Sport and Exercise Science. A BASES qualification allows you, as a researcher, to carry out research in sports and exercise science. Without the qualification, you wouldn't be allowed to carry out research, and even if you did, the research would not be recognised. The accreditation allows you to carry out research in the three main areas of sports science: physiology, psychology, and biomechanics. So, two theorists did some experiments to see how far people would go and see if they would abide by ethically or legally. So, Zimbardo in 1973 conducted an experiment called the Stanford Prison Experiment. The aim of the experiment was to investigate how readily people would conform to the roles of a guard and prisoner in a role-playing exercise that simulated prison life. Within a very short time, both bodyguards and prisoners were settling into their new roles, with the guards adapting to the roles quickly and easily. Within the first few hours of beginning the experiment, some guards began to harass the prisoners. And Milgram in 1963 was interested in researching how far people would go in obeying instruction if it involved harming another person. They found that ordinary people are likely to follow orders given by an authoritative figure, even to the extent of killing an innocent human being. Obedience to authority is ingrained in us all from the way that we are brought up. So, what are the ethical and legal considerations? So, I will be explaining these within scenarios, but I'll just describe what they are. So, there is Institutional Ethics and Review Committee, Ethical Clearance, Risk-Benefit Analysis, Volunteers, Informed Consent, Right to Withdraw, Health and Medical Screening Questionnaire, Participants Disclaimer, Equality and Impartiality, Researcher Responsibility, Deception, Data Protection, Confidentiality and Anonymity, Scientific Misconduct. And the consequences are suspension, prison sentence, fines, ethical training, psychological harm, physical harm, and BASES accreditation being taken away. So, scenario 1. So, a 1 rep max bench press after taking a pre-workout substance. So, scenario doing a 1 rep max bench press while taking a pre-workout substance is that there would need to be considerations thought about by the researchers. Because the participant is doing a 1 rep max bench press, this means that they are trying to push the heaviest weight possible, which if they can't push the weight could lead to physical harm. Before the experiment begins, they will have to tell the participants that they are taking the pre-workout supplements with stimulants in. Participants have the right to withdraw if they do not want to take the pre-workout stimulants. However, if the researcher failed to achieve this, then the researcher could be liable for being accused of deception, and this could result in consequences such as a fine, or the researcher's BASIS accreditation being taken away. Furthermore, because there are going to be a number of participants taking part, all with different muscle mass and strength, this could lead to a few participants with emotional harm. It would be emotional harm because they might get jealous of other participants lifting more, and then as a result of not giving their all to the study. Before taking part in the study, participants will have to sign a consent form giving consent to the study. In the experiment, the researcher gave out consent forms, which is good ethical and legal practice because you can't force a participant to take part. However, in the consent form and over the study, the researcher only said they would be doing a 1 rep max bench press and not taking a pre-workout substance prior to the exercise. This is bad ethical and legal practice because this is deception. The researcher has deceived the participants, and this is not ethical. Because the researcher failed to achieve this, the researcher is liable for being accused of deception. This could result in consequences such as a fine or the researcher's BASIS accreditation being taken away. This could also be a risk-benefit analysis because if the researcher thinks that the risk is too high, then they might not go forward with the experiment, but if the risk is worth it, then they will continue with the experiment. Scenario 2. An investigation of 16 to 17-year-olds completing maximal effort sprints, taking blood lactate samples after each sprint. An investigation of the sprints while taking blood lactate samples. As this experiment requires blood lactate samples to be taken, the participant needs to give consent. However, because the participant is under the age of 18, they also need to get their parent or carer to give consent. The sprints are carried out at maximal effort, which means the participants could also push themselves to the limit. This could cause physical harm to the participants. If the researcher didn't explain this in the consent form, the researcher could be liable for the responsibility of his participants, which is known as researcher responsibility, to keep all of his participants safe at all times, and ethical training, to get training on how to manage consent forms and how to carry out the blood lactate properly if he wasn't trained. So if the researcher wasn't trained in blood lactate, he should not be doing the tests on the participants. So scenario 3, the effectiveness of punishment in girls' football if they don't score when shooting. So there's an experiment into whether girls can score with or without the goalkeeper. If girls do not score with the goalkeeper in the goal, the girls face a lap of the football pitch. However, if they do not score with the goalkeeper in the goal, then the punishment is 10 press-ups. However, this isn't fair because by the researchers, because the goalkeeper could make a really good save compared to a bad mistake, and then one girl could get away with it and the other girl would have to do the punishment. Because the researchers are given punishment to the girls, they could face a tribunal for pushing the girls too hard or causing them physical damage. The researchers don't let the girls have another shot until the girls have completed the lap or the 10 press-ups. This is against their informed consent because the punishment was not stated in the form. So the consequence is that the researcher could face a suspension from the job, or a law sentence, or a tribunal or a prison sentence, because he has pushed the girls too far and caused them physical harm when in the form he said that he wouldn't, and he has to do that, which could also lead to deception because he hasn't put it in the form, but then he has still carried out with it. And the final scenario, an experiment to see whether swim caps help with long-distance swim time, so the researcher will have to have considerations when carrying out this experiment because swimming is a sport that has little amount of clothing and some participants may feel uncomfortable when taking part. As a researcher, you would make sure that this is on the consent form when the participant gives consent to the experiment. This shows that you as a researcher have given full detail and honesty of the experiment and haven't deceived the participant. When the experiment is completed, the researchers must give honest results to say whether or not the results were beneficial or not beneficial, and give all of the correct quantitative and qualitative data. So, if anything does go wrong in the test, the researcher had a participant disclaimer, and a participant disclaimer is informing the participants that if anything were to go wrong within the experiment, that the researcher would be covered and the blame can't be put on the researcher but to other factors. So that was my 4.1 ethical and legal considerations in sport and exercise science.